Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Social Work Month. My name is Annette Johns, and I'm the Associate Director of Policy and Practice with the Newfoundland and Labrador College of Social Workers. I'll be your moderator for today's education event, Just a Game, Understanding Gaming Behavior in Youth. Today's topic is one that I'm sure will be of interest to you personally and professionally. We know that gaming behavior has increased amongst youth, and for many throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, gaming was a way to stay connected with friends. I'm excited for this topic today as our presenters delve into this issue of gaming behavior in youth. The webinar presentation will be approximately 60 minutes, followed by a 30-minute question and answer period that I will moderate. Please note that all the details you need, like how to access the slide deck and other housekeeping information, is under the announcement and housekeeping widget. All the widgets can be accessed by clicking the blue and white icons at the bottom of your window. You can also resize and move around any of the elements you see on your screen to customize your viewing experience. During the presentation, I encourage you to type in your questions using the question mark icon at any time, and I'll begin asking them at the end of the presentation. Only the presenters and I can see the questions. I now want to introduce our speakers, Derek Singleton and Kimberly Hacko, who are both registered social workers here in Newfoundland and Labrador. Their full bios can be found in the bio widget, and I do want to say a few introductory words. Derek has 25 years of clinical experience as a social worker. He's been with Eastern Health for 21 years, spending the past 20 years at the Janeway Family Center, where he is the social work clinical leader. Derek has also been engaged in part-time private practice for the past 15 years and is a sessional instructor at the medical school at MUN teaching clinical skills. Derek has extensive experience with providing therapy with teens, families, parents, and adults. And areas of treatment competency include, but are not limited to, anxiety disorders, various forms of trauma, depression, self-harm, ADHD, divorce, family conflict, school refusal, addictions, including excessive gaming, sexuality-related issues, gender identity, workplace stress, relationship issues, and parenting strategies. Our second presenter, Kimberly, has been working with children and families for over 10 years. She's been a member of the Janeway Family Center team for 2 years and also provides private practice part-time. Her focus is working with children and youth who have experiences of trauma, anxiety, depression, emotional dysregulation, and gender exploration. Kim works from a therapeutic framework inclusive of multiple approaches, including cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, and dialectical behavior therapy. I'm so pleased that Derek and Kimberly are delivering this webinar for us today in celebration of Social Work Month, and I'm now going to pass the virtual podium over to them to begin the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Annette. Just making sure before we get started, can you hear me clearly? Okay, I'll assume that's a yes. Okay. Okay, anyway, thanks for joining us, everybody. So just a game. So in terms of our presentation today, I guess our interest in this topic just came from, we all know gaming has been around for decades, but in recent years, even within the last 10 years, we've noticed directly and indirectly, we've seen impacts on the young people we work with. A lot of times negative. We do see some positive things, and we'll talk about those. But also we've seen more in our parenting groups as well that we run. Parents within the last 4 years, I'd say, are bringing up gaming issues, are coming up a lot more in our parenting groups than they did previously. So that's where the interest comes from. So today we're going to be looking at trends in gaming, because one of the things that has come to light for us is just being up to date. And even doing this presentation, I know myself and Kim, it brought us up to date with regards to a lot of information that that was new for us with regards to current gaming trends. So we're going to look at trends, the current knowledge, and where things are in terms of what our kids, what our teens are experiencing. And we're going to look at how to determine if gaming is a problematic behavior, and then look at treatment options. So that's our that's our outline for today, which I just kind of went over. So, and also another interesting thing, and I know Annette alluded to it, is we're going to look at gaming during the pandemic. And I have we have an MSW student, Heather Doyle. So she's doing her MSW through Memorial, and she's currently doing her practicum at the Janeway Family Center. So Heather is going to talk about that aspect of gaming with regards to the pandemic. As we all know, it took on a prominent and different role during the pandemic, particularly for not only young people, adults as well, but primarily for young people.
Okay, and we're going to look at some, we figured this was probably a good place to start, to look at the evolution of gaming, and to see how far it's come over the last, I guess, 80 years. The first example of a video game was actually called the Nimotron, and it was based on some sort of mathematical game. Came out in the 1940s, and you can see the photo that we have of it there on the presentation. It's a pretty rudimentary machine that's pretty huge there. So since in the last 80 years, we've seen gaming become much more accessible, with arcade gaming in the 1960s, and then the emergence of at-home gaming in the late 60s and 70s. In the 1980s, we see the emergence of computer games and home computer games. And again, these were pretty rudimentary, Pong and Pac-Man and things of that nature that Derek could probably speak to more than me because I wasn't alive at the time.
Lived experience of gaming.
So what's more familiar to me is probably the 1990s, like the Nintendos and the Segas, and when the home consoles became very popular. In the last 20 years, we've seen a huge emergence of internet computer and console gaming that has a more social aspect to it, because people are able to connect with each other and through these devices and through the facilitation of the internet. And we've seen the games such as role-playing games and massively multiplayer online role-play games come to be. And another theme that's become prevalent is, and also, speaks to the accessibility of gaming, is the emergence of smartphones in the last 15 years or so. So since 2007, we've seen the smartphone gaming take an upsurge.
So to be clear on, because your definition of video gaming may be influenced by your age. So just to be, we want to be clear in terms of looking at the various video game platforms. Because some people think of video games as like you might think as a PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, or an Xbox, but we just want to be clear that the various platforms available to people to game are pretty extensive. So just to be clear on what they are currently. First one, we got PCs. So there are gaming computers. So these aren't just your regular household computer. They usually are quite expensive, and they're pretty powerful to run the game. So sometimes you might hear young people talk about gaming on a computer, but like I said, they're usually using a pretty powerful computer. So that's one method of playing games. And then we got our consoles, which we're talking about, like Xbox, Nintendo, PlayStation. So they're the consoles. The biggest one, like Kim said, that a lot of times people don't consider is mobile gaming. So through like mobile, through our phones, through our smartphones. So even things like Candy Crush, various kind of games that sometimes people wouldn't even consider as a game. But a lot of times, if you look at a lot of people spend quite an extensive amount of time on their phones playing these games, and it does fall into the same category as, is engaged in games. It's just different types. The emergence of VR, virtual reality, that's, say, one of the newer ones, and it's taking on a more prominent role. I had the experience to play or try a VR there a couple of weeks ago. My nephew has it, And I'll probably never do it again, because even though I was in my family room, I thought I was on a 100-story building and was going to fall off, and got quite dizzy. So VR is probably the next wave of gaming, but it has started. It's kind of in the early stages now, but I think we'll see more of it. But it is out there. Streaming, like I said, even through Fire Sticks and Roku and different things like that, we think of just as a way to access Netflix. But they do stream games, and if you didn't know, if you ask kids or teens about it, they're usually aware of it. So it's another way of accessing. And even through our web browsers and traditional arcade, the arcade, they're still there. They may not be as popular as they were back in the 80s, but they are still a way of gaming, and some people do like it. One thing I'm going to add with the web browser, and it's become we're not covering in this presentation, but in the research we did come across information with regards to gambling. And gambling, the gaming that's available online for gambling, the lines are becoming very blurred between like gaming with regards to video games and then the gambling piece. And sometimes before they were very separate things, but now, and even if you watch TV and you see there's the number of ads for gambling and that kind of gaming, so it falls under gaming. It's a little different, but like I said, we're not covering it here, but it's something that is emerging as as an area of just that we need to be aware of knowledge wise, and even just to be just to monitor. So we've got this slide here. It's just to kind of demonstrate just the sheer how big of a beast gaming is. So we just got a lot of numbers here, but it's just to kind of wrap your head around what gaming actually is on a worldwide level. So when we look at the world, so based on our research, there's 2.5 billion people who are active gamers. Revenue wise, for 2021 worldwide, revenues for all gaming combined was 180 billion. So that's about 9 or 10 Muskrat Falls. So about $180 billion. And projected revenue by 2026 is $256 billion. So it's massive. Like when you look at it on that scale, it is massive. So some things that might be surprising, so in terms of the average age of a gamer, is 34. And so the average age is 34, and it's the average person who games is 34, has kids, and owns a house. So for me, I guess that was surprising, because a lot of times I think there's some assumptions built in that a lot of gamers are, teenagers or even young adults, like that 19, 20, whatever. But the range of gaming through the lifespan is quite extensive. 60% percentage of Americans who play video games daily. So, well over half. And I think that's where the smartphones come in. The smartphones, most people have a smartphone. So I think the driving force of that percentage is smartphones, but it is significant that over half of Americans play every day. We did look for Canadian data. We really weren't able to find much data that was reflective of our own country, so we apologize for that, because most stuff we have is based on the U.S. Another interesting thing, particularly as someone who works with adolescents, does a lot of parent work, 70% of parents that believe games have a positive influence on children's lives. I thought that was a bit high, but I've looked at a couple of things, and that's really where it comes in at. And I think what we're seeing there as well is we have parents that are gamers themselves, they probably gamed as teens. Now they're adults, they have kids, and they game. And there's a lot of data that shows that a lot of parents actually game with their kids. So, and when we look at the distribution of gaming, under 18, 21% of all gamers are under the age of 18. Largest group is 18 to 34 years of age, and that's 38%. And gamers between 34 and 54 make up 26% of the gaming population, and 15% are over the age of 54. So that's kind of the distribution. And so a lot of times it seems that people that start off gaming then continue through the life cycle. I'm going to jump back to this one. I'm going to do the next slide first, and then I'm going to come back. So when we look at trends of gaming, one of the biggest trends, and I got to say, have noticed this in my practice with teens, that I've seen more girls that game, and like not just casually, but are kind of hardcore into it. And I remember the first time I saw it a few years back, I was kind of shocked because it falls into, like, sometimes we have stereotypes of boys being gamers, but the research out there, and is pretty consistent. Like all the research we've been looking at is showing that females account for 45% of all gamers, and that is for the U.S. and for Asia. Now, Asia makes up 50% of the worldwide gamers. So like I said, almost half of gamers are female. So for me, in terms of a trend, that was probably one of the more surprising things that I saw. But I think it's also helpful to know, because even knowing that, even in terms of assessment, and even when I'm meeting with clients, like, it's just helpful to know and to assess if, because that could potentially be an issue if there is problematic gaming behavior. When we look at gender differences, the motivation to engage in gaming differs between the genders, which is interesting. So females like competition. A lot of it is about challenging themselves, and a lot of it is about social relationships, which we're going to spend a bit of time talking about afterwards. And males tend to use gaming for coping with stress, achieving success, competition, as females do, and they like to pass away the time more through the gaming experience. And with regards to preferred platform, 70% of females preferred mobile gaming on a smartphone, while 30% preferred console or PC gaming. And for males, couldn't find any concrete data other than that males preferred PC and console gaming was their preferred choice, but I don't have the actual numbers on that, unfortunately. Okay. Oh, wait, no. Okay, and to follow up, in terms of looking at gaming, in terms of by genre, because there's many genres of gaming. So in terms of what male and females prefer, we've just got those there. So on the side, you'll see there's a lot of acronyms. So I just put a little thing there. So if you see FPS as first-person shooter, RPG, role-play games, MOBA, multiplayer online battle arena, and RTS, real-time strategy. So you can see there is a difference in male and female preferences. Both like the role-playing games. However, males do like sports, and first-person shooters are common with males, whereas first-person shooter, sports, and other ones are the least popular with females. So there's overlap with regards to the role-playing games. However, the preferences are different. And like puzzles, men generally are their least popular one is playing games that are puzzle-based, whereas females do like them. So there are differences in the genders. So that is, like I said, it's just interesting when you see some of those differences. Now, this is another interesting thing, particularly for anyone out there that's a parent. I think if someone asked you, would you like your son or daughter to get a scholarship to university? I think most parents would be quite excited. Like, yes, saves me a lot of money, and like that's a pretty big accomplishment. And a lot of times when we think of scholarships, we think of, basketball, hockey, gymnastics, like different athletic scholarships and that. But one thing that, in terms of when we look at the trends and how gaming is impacting education and post-secondary education, particularly in the U.S., the amount of scholarships for gaming is becoming quite huge. So right now, over 30 post-secondary institutions in the U.S. have gaming programs, and with regards to the scholarships, they play on teams. So a lot of it is what's called esports, and they compete against other colleges and universities. So it's quite fascinating. And with regards to their programs, a lot of the universities are connected with like gaming like companies with regards to internships and employment. An example is in Vermont, there's a Champlain University or college in Burlington, Vermont, has a big gaming program, even though it's a small college. And most of their graduates go to Montreal, because Montreal is an hour and a half away, and a lot of the companies in Montreal like just take these students as interns and then hire them. So, like I said, it's a real like emerging area, and I think it's also an example of some of the positive things that can come out of gaming. Like when you look at the whole scholarship piece and people also going into programs where they can like have a career out of it if it is something that they do enjoy. And some of the areas that they can specialize in are listed there in terms of research, design, production, graphics, and data collection. One thing we also wanted to highlight here with gaming, when we look at youth, is also looking at like younger children. So with this, we're kind of looking at the more or less 12 and under group. And one thing, and this is something that we've seen in our practice, and I'm sure other people have seen maybe in their social work experience or personally, like in terms of children, whether they're playing games unsupervised that are age inappropriate, or it might be an older sibling has a game that they're just watching, or they play on the slide when mom and dad aren't looking. So, but some of the data and the research on like what does this do to kids? So when younger children are playing age inappropriate games, it gives them like they almost become immune and numb to violence. Like the impact, they just a lot of times don't react to it because they get desensitized. A lot of times with younger children, we'll see imitation of violent acts, like things that they've either witnessed in games or actually carried out in games. So sometimes they will just imitate and, think it's funny or trying to show to friends or whatever. We also know that the more realistic and repeated exposure increases the impact and the negative impact on kids. A lot of times with children, we also see obsession that once they start seeing a game, a lot of the games are they're designed to attract you, like between the visually and auditory signs. So they do make them very appeasing, and so a lot of times we'll see kids tend to get obsessed with violent games. Some of the most common games that we see with this are GTA, which is Grand Theft Auto, and the COD series, which is Call of Duty, not fish and chips. So they're the two most common ones. And when we look at what they're viewing, and a lot of times the common themes include killing, war scenes, whether it's current or like past wars. See criminal behavior, sexual exploitation, and violence towards women. They tend to be the top, like when you look at things that fall under the category of violence, that they're the things that they're exposed to regularly. Okay, so I'm going to pass it over to Kim now, and we'll look at gaming as a behavioral addiction.
Okay, so first we're just going to look at, I guess, one of the definitions of addiction as a primary chronic disease of brain reward, motivation, memory, and related circuitry. Dysfunction in these circuits leads to characteristic biological, psychological, social, and spiritual manifestations. And this is reflected in an individual pathologically pursuing reward and or relief by substance use or other behaviors. So you see the common, one of the words that you see there that sticks out is reward. So the addictive elements of the games appeals to the brain's reward system. So we do see an upsurge in the secretion of dopamine in the brain. And as we go through this section, we're going to look at the components of gaming that I guess add to its addictive quality. And we're also going to look at some of the gained, I guess, not popularity, but the increasing awareness of some problematic gaming and even the classification of a gaming disorder in the DSM and through the World Health Organization. Okay. So in 2018, the World Health Organization released their 11th edition of the International Classification of Diseases, and they did include gaming disorder in that revision. They define gaming disorder as a pattern of gaming behavior, and that could be digital gaming or video gaming, which is characterized by an impaired control over gaming, increasing priority given to gaming over other activities to the extent that gaming takes precedence over other interests and daily activities, and continuation or escalation of gaming despite the occurrence of negative consequences. So with the World Health Organization, they did notice in specific areas that gaming was becoming a mental health condition, and there seems to be an upsurge specifically in some Asian countries, and there was a public health response in some ways. In China, I believe there was a response with a curfew on gaming at 10 p.m. I believe it was 10 p.m. that they're not permitted to game after 10 p.m. And in South Korea, there are rehabilitation facilities for gaming, and that's another theme that's been emerging in the past few years. So we will look at, some of the specific criteria in further slides, but in the ICD-11, we see the criteria for gaming disorder as a significant impairment in personal, family, social, educational, occupational, or other important areas of functioning, and would normally have been evident for 12 months. So, the language we would use is what are the impacts on the activities of daily living, and for, how long has this been happening? Those are some things that we would want to look at clinically. Okay. And with the DSM-5, it was released in 2013. At the time, there was not sufficient research to include internet gaming disorder as a psychiatric disorder. But it was added to the research appendix with the intent to further research the possibility of including it as a potential disorder in the DSM, the upcoming DSM. Internet gaming disorder is defined as persistent and recurrent use of the internet to engage in games, often with other players, leading to clinically significant impairment or distress. And despite the name, internet gaming disorder can be applied to console gaming that isn't specifically on the internet. It's just that mostly when you do see the addictive qualities of gaming, it often includes internet gaming. So now we're going to look at some indicators of problematic gaming. Specifically, when we're talking about internet gaming disorder, the literature that I did come across was surprising in that it would probably only apply to about 1% of gamers. And when we look at problematic gaming, the statistics that I came across, dependent on the area of the globe that the statistics were coming from, problematic gaming can be up to from 5 to 9% of gamers. So it seems to be a bit of a spectrum there, whereas someone may meet the criteria for the disorder and where the gaming may be problematic. So some of the indicators of problematic gaming would be elevated cortisol levels in in the body and hypertension. And these are some indicators that we see specifically with people who are participating in violent video games. So, that increased blood pressure and increased stress response in the body. We also see social isolation. So people not engaging in activities away from screen. And we see increased social activity on screen. We would also see some behavioral issues, and I think that this is a common theme that we may see, Derek, with parents specifically that present to us with children with that they're concerned for their level of gaming. That when the game is taken away, there's significant distress or significant behavioral issues and aggression and things of that nature.
And other things that may fall in there with behavioral issues, it can impact things like, for some, not all, but like some people engage in gaming to the point where they start to neglect themselves. So basic hygiene, like in terms of just washing themselves, brushing their teeth, changing their clothes, things like that. In terms of get back to what Kim said in terms of looking at the ADLs, the activities of daily living. Like, so some of those things we take for granted. Sometimes we see parents reporting that, like, they go in their kids' room and it smells really bad, and they're in the room all the time and just gaming, like, for hours and hours and hours. So, like I said, that's some of the behavioral issues that we do see, like, are around that hygiene and neglecting themselves, and even eating. That a lot of times, and I think this goes back to stereotype, we tend to think sometimes some of that's gaming might be overweight and because of lack of movement, but a lot of the research is showing that the vast majority of gamers are not overweight, that they are actually weight-wise are in like close to average, and sometimes maybe below average. And a lot of it is that sometimes they're eating less because they're so engaged in gaming that they don't want to get up and eat. And then if their hands are on the controller, like, they may take in fewer calories. So nutrition can be an issue. And then we haven't looked at it, but then the question is, how does, like, their eating patterns just impact their basic functioning and their mental health, like if they're not getting proper nutrition. So, that's other things to consider.
Yeah, for sure. Another thing to consider, when you think of behavior, is like the behavioral, like sleeping behavioral patterns. Some kids will get up in the middle of the night to game when their parents, to hide the gaming behavior from their parents, or they may wake up extra early to get some gaming in before school. And of course, that disrupts the other, it has an impact on their ability to focus and other factors that we're talking about here, right? Decreased focus on other tasks. I know one of the common themes that I've noticed since the pandemic is kids coming to me and saying that, they think that they have ADHD because they're having a huge issue focusing on tasks, certain tasks, but they will acknowledge that they're able to focus on other tasks. And when I do assess which tasks they're able to focus on, they'll admit to me that gaming is something that they're finding that they're able to focus on for hours at a time, but homework not so much. So, when, again, coming back to that reward system in the brain and that instant gratification that gaming does provide, that other tasks that aren't so easy and aren't so instantly gratifying, such as homework or even learning a new skill or playing a game with board game with the family, those things aren't holding focus as easily as gaming is. And of course, impact on relationships. So if you have a young person who is focused on gaming, they may not engage in so much family time. They may not engage in social activities that are away from screen. And they may and we will get to this later in the presentation because there are some social benefits to gaming as well that we're seeing on screen. But the question remains, how is that impacting the in-person relationships, right?
One thing I'm going to add on the relationships, and it's not about youth, but when we were researching this, one thing I came across was impact on adult relationships. And now what it did focus on was adult male gaming, and like impacting like romantic relationships in a negative way, and has led to the end of relationships. And I read one article that where it talked about there was females that actually screened out, like if they were going into a new relationship, that they would screen out any male like that game they wanted nothing to do with, based on past relationships that were really ended because of gaming behavior, that it was a trigger that they wouldn't even consider dating or anybody who was an active gamer, even if they said they didn't have a problem with it.
So just back to some indicators of the criteria for the internet gaming disorder and the gaming disorder from the ICD-11 and the DSM-5. I guess just to quickly go over that, for the ICD, we're going to see, one of the three of the things that we look for are impaired control over gaming. So how often is it? What's the frequency, duration, and are they able to exhibit control when they're able to get away from gaming or to stop gaming? Increased priority given to gaming over other activities of daily living and life interests, and continuation or escalation of gaming despite the occurrence of negative consequences. And when we look at the criteria for the proposed diagnosis of internet gaming disorder in the DSM-5, 5 out of 9 of these criteria need to be present over a 12-month period. So unsuccessful attempts to control the participation in gaming. Using gaming to escape or relieve a negative mood. Preoccupation with gaming, so thinking about the gaming when they're not gaming. Tolerance, so like any addiction, the tolerance level increases, so the need to spend increasing amounts of time engaged in gaming. Loss of other interests or hobbies. Continued excessive use despite having knowledge of the psychosocial problems that come along with it, an impact on relationships or education or career opportunities, and having deceived family members, therapists, or other supports regarding the amount of gaming that the person is engaging in, and withdrawal symptoms when the gaming is taken away.
And the other thing I'd add to the deceiving family members, and it goes back to some of the behavioral things. That one thing that I've seen in recent years is teenagers. I guess I'm not sure if the word is stealing or unauthorized use of parents' credit cards, and parents get their credit card statement to see charges, and they have teens buying things within the games, because a lot of times the games are actually free now. They don't have to pay for the game, but within the game, to advance or to have better weapons or what they call a skin, that they have to buy these. And a lot of times teens don't have the financial means to do it. So a lot of times they do take their parents' credit cards or sneak it out of their purse or wallet and use it. So that would fall under that deceivement. But that is something I've seen an increase in within the last, say, 4 or 5 years.
Okay, so some key factors that contribute to gaming addiction. And not only do these factors contribute to gaming addiction, but they also contribute to the attractiveness of gaming, really. So, even in gaming that isn't problematic, we're going to see these factors be present. So disinhibition. When you look at gaming, there is a way to experience yourself in another way, specifically in these role-playing games. We'll see that you're able to create certain avatars, you're able to create certain characters. So, you're able to take on an alter ego and to experience yourself in a way that you don't experience yourself in real life or away from screen. So disinhibition is definitely one of the factors that makes gaming attractive. Especially when you see some youth who may be experiencing not fitting in socially at school or not fitting in with a peer group, and they're able to find a way to experience themselves in a different way, in some of these role player games where they're able to connect with others. Stimulating content. So, of course, these games are stimulating and often come with a good storyline. Some of the storylines you're able to change as you go along, especially in the role player games. Of course, there's content that's going to keep you hooked. Ease of access. So games are readily accessible. I mean, you're able to access them from your home. You don't have to go out to access games. You can access them even when you're on the go on your mobile device. So that's certainly a factor that contributes to the attractiveness of gaming or even gaming addiction. Time distortion or dissociation. So, oftentimes we see, specifically with youth, that they may game for hours and hours at a time, and the time, time's not perceived as it is away from screen. So there is a time distortion associated with it.
I'll share this. About 10 years ago, I got into playing a game called Assassin's Creed. And I loved it and got so sucked into it. And we talk about time distortion. I'd be playing this game and I'd feel my head nodding, and all that. And if you asked me what time it is or how long I was playing the game, I would say, I've been playing this for probably 2 hours and it's probably 11 o'clock. And then I'd look and it would be 2 or 3 in the morning and I'd have to get up at 7. And I hit the point where I actually had to stop playing it. But as an adult who can self-regulate and understand, okay, this is not good for me. This is impacting my functioning. I actually just stopped playing the game as much as I loved it because I had no sense of time when I started playing this game. So when we look at youth or anybody who has problematic gaming behavior and who has trouble with self-control, self-regulation, and this is an escape, maybe their reality is not so great with regards to family or school or whatever, that you can see how easily it becomes just get to spend hours at these games and to lose your sense of time. Because like I said, it happened to me, and like I said, thankfully, after literally a week, I was like, yeah, I can't do this because I can't function. But like I said, we can see where, our youth can really get impacted by this.
Definitely. Perceived anonymity is another factor. And when we think about this, again, coming back to teenagers, face to face, they may not be able to express themselves in ways that they want to, or they may have some self-esteem or self-confidence issues. And communication through the social aspects of some of these games provides that anonymity where they can communicate in ways that they may not normally communicate, and they can say things to other people on the games that they may not be able to say to peers in real life. So there's that degree of anonymity. And the last factor that we're going to speak about is just the dopamine dump. So the extreme amounts of dopamine that the body that the brain secretes in relation to playing these games. So one of the psychiatrists that we're going to reference further along in our presentation here, he is an avid gamer who's actually gone through a gaming addiction himself. His name is Alok Kanoja, and he has a YouTube channel called the Healthy Gamer GG. So I definitely recommend checking that out because there's really good information on there, specifically for clinicians who are helping people with any problematic gaming. But he does a really good job of explaining 3 stages in relation to your brain's reward and the reward center in your brain and the pleasure center in your brain, and how that responds to gaming. So he separates it into 3 stages, whereby the first one is, you've got that insurgence of dopamine and everything feels really fun, and the gaming is kind of like bringing you on this high experience. And he says, basically after a few weeks or a few months, you get into your brain becomes accustomed to the amount of dopamine. It's not as fun, and you don't experience the lows that come with negative emotions as much. So while gaming, it's a distraction from the lows that may come in life. And you're experiencing sort of like it's almost like distraction, really, where you're able to experience the game and not have to deal with the some other things that may be going on in life. And the third stage that he describes is that the gaming is not as fun, and gamers don't really know why they're doing it anymore. And again, the time distortion comes into effect here, and they may not realize why they're playing the game for this amount of time, and the activities that they may have wanted or enjoyed previous to engaging in this gaming behavior just don't feel as good anymore. So the activities that would have provided us with that pleasure response or that reward response, but doesn't provide that instant gratification, doesn't feel as good anymore. And he refers to this stage as dopamine exhaustion, where your brain is just so flooded with dopamine that nothing really feels as good anymore. So his suggestion is to take yourself away from the gaming for a period of time. And he said usually between a few weeks and a few weeks to a few months, things will go back to normal, and to keep engaging in the activities of daily living and the hobbies and the interests that you would have before getting involved in the gaming. And slowly the pleasure and the rewards associated with those activities will become more regular again. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting way to put it in those 3 sort of criteria. Okay, so now to discuss treatment methods. So treatment methods will be, common cognitive behavioral therapy, helping clients recognize the association between their behaviors and their thoughts and their emotions. One of the common themes that I came across in my research for this presentation is that a lot of people who experience problematic gaming aren't in touch with their emotions, and they don't want to feel the emotions that don't feel so good. So the painful emotions. So helping them recognize those patterns and the distraction, the impacts of the distraction on the overall being. Motivational interviewing is another another aspect of treatment, especially with teenagers. We see a lot of parents coming to us because they perceive their child to have a problem. So we want to assess where, the motivation of the client themselves and not just the parents.
And this approach can be really helpful when you have a youth that's say the motivation is low, so they're coming in for counseling. Mom and dad are kind of directing it or kind of enforcing it. They don't want to come in, but this approach is just it's just being very respectful of their opinion and just kind of hearing them out, but even just trying to get them to provide it, or just to backtrack, provide a safe environment and even get them to try and commit or contract for even 3 sessions to create a safe environment, even if it's just to start exploring like their gaming and like the possibility that there could be issues. And sometimes, a lot of times, what it comes down to gaming is the threat of it being taken away. And sometimes even just talking about and being honest about, like, no one's going to take it away. Nobody wants to take it away. It's something you enjoy. And one word I use a lot, and you're going to hear it coming up in one of our videos, and that is about balance. So a lot of times you'll have youth and anyone with problematic gaming being very threatened about it being taken away, because a lot of times it is a security blanket for them. So it's sometimes an approach that's respectful, providing a safe environment, but also even just giving some reassurance that the plan isn't to take it away, but just maybe towards finding a bit more balance in life.
Yeah, I think too, that's a really important point, Derek, too, because I think because there is such a strong association with gaming and with the reward and pleasure centers of the brain, I think that using the gaming as a reward can be beneficial, right? Like, after I do my homework, then I'm going to game for a little bit. Or, after I study for final exams, then I'm probably going to give myself, some time to game. So, it's not all about taking it away. And of course you can see a big upheaval through adolescence specifically with if you propose that.
One thing and the other thing too is we've got here about the importance of clinicians being educated about gaming culture, addiction, and recovery. So we got a video, not the first, we got one coming up, but our second video is about that. And I guess for myself, Kim and Heather, it's been really helpful in terms of just bring us up to date, because gaming is one of these things where if your knowledge base is 3 years old, you're out of touch. And sometimes, like, 3 years isn't a long time for us adults, but 3 years in technology, 3 years in social media and gaming is huge. So trying to keep up on it, and like, you can do your research, but also even from clients finding out. But like I said, that it is an important thing of just being up to date on what the current culture is, and hopefully, like I said, you'll get some of that in what's coming up.
I think that's really important too, for us to be educated so that we can help parents to be educated too, because there's so many social norms associated with, my child is, this is their hobby. Like, should they be playing hockey instead, or should they be, doing, some other sort of activity that we're more used to associating with teenage, like positive pro-social teenage outcomes. And yet we are seeing that gaming now is a spectator sport, and like you said, people are getting scholarships for gaming. So I guess helping educate parents, to the current social norms and advantages of gaming as well.
Quickly, just going to reference our stages of change. So this is something that we use in treatment, and it's just good for assessment and in the front end when we meet with a client in terms of just figuring out where they are. So knowing if they're in pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation. So and then it's also helpful to kind of revisit during the course of treatment. And like, just to see where they're progressing to, and if they shift back and forth, and even educating our clients on stages of change. So even just to increase their own self-awareness, and even to know when they're making progress, or if there's times when they know that they are struggling. So sometimes it's just a helpful visual to have for not only clinicians, but also for clients as well. So we're going to put on a video, and it's on treatment. The video is about 3 minutes, or a little over 3 minutes. So I'm going to put that on there now.
If you spend time with any teenage boys, you probably won't be surprised to hear that 97% of them in the U.S. play video games somewhat regularly. And with competitive esports on the rise, gaming is only getting more popular. But when does a hobby turn into an unhealthy habit? As Christina Quinn reports, video game addiction is a reality for many, but there is help.
250 million people play Fortnite. That's bigger than the population of most countries. And it can be hard to stop playing, as this woman, who we'll call Mary, found out when her son's enthusiasm turned into an obsession.
His character was changing clearly. He wasn't sleeping, he wasn't thinking straight, and he was starting to lie.
She did what most parents might do. She took Fortnite away, but that backfired. Her son ran away, and then one night they rushed him to the emergency room.
We felt that he may hurt himself.
She says the experts wanted to treat her son for depression. Then she found a doctor who had a different approach.
He's like, scam over, we got this.
Alok Kanodia is a Harvard psychiatrist. He's also a gamer, and he believes gaming addiction is really about filling a void.
Biological or substance use disorders are very different from behavioral addictions.
And he says cold turkey isn't the answer. It's about finding balance. His approach comes from first-hand experience. He was addicted to video games.
I mean, after 2 years of college, I had less than a 2.0 GPA, was on academic probation, was on the cusp of failing out because I would just wake up every day and play video games from about 11 a.m. till 3 in the morning.
He was desperate for help, and his dad, desperate to help him, sent him to an ashram in India to study yoga and meditation for 3 months.
And what I really found in India is a system that teaches you why. That teaches you what is the nature of desire. Like, why do you fall victim to your desires on some days and not victim to your desires on other days?
My sense is that you try to change, and then you notice that when you try to make a change, you start to become uncomfortable.
This is part of his therapeutic approach, one that now reaches thousands of gamers. He calls it Healthy Gamer. And he holds live sessions online in the places where gamers are, on Twitch and Discord.
Think about the person that you are.
They include guided meditations and frank discussions about mental health, and they attract hundreds of thousands of views on YouTube. Gamers, he says, tend to be analytical thinkers. He coaches them to connect with their emotions.
So a lot of the gamers that I work with are actually not aware of like what their negative emotions even are, because they spend so many hours a day doing something that is literally shutting off their negative emotional circuitry.
Kanodia sees Healthy Gamer as a toolkit, a way to reach gamers who may not be able to access the kind of one-on-one therapy he provided to Mary's son.
Alok has a way of talking to him with logic instead of cold turkey. It was more moderation, finding other domains in your life, finding that balance
between the online world and the real world.
Christina Quinn joins me now.
Okay.
So yeah, just to kind of briefly discuss the video. His YouTube name is Healthy Gamer GG, and he has a lot of psychoeducational material on YouTube that can be really helpful clinically for us with helping youth understand the impacts of video gaming on them. And again, like one of the things that Derek and I took from that video as well was the importance of mindfulness and helping youth who are gamers connect with that, the present moment and to engage in mindfulness practice.
Yeah. So we're not. I don't think it's realistic to send all our youth to India for 3 months to a yoga retreat. But like I said, there are things like in terms of within treatment and with regards to learning and practicing mindfulness skills. So there are things we can take from that.
Yeah, for sure. And also the aspect when he talks about coaching youth to or gamers to connect with emotions. He calls them negative emotions because gaming can shut off the negative emotion circuitry in the brain. So again, bringing in that cognitive behavioral therapy perspective of helping connect with emotions and helping identify, the somatic symptoms of emotions and things of that nature. So, yeah. So yeah, social aspects of gaming. So you may have noticed in that video, they did talk about Dr. Kanodia connecting with gamers on platforms that gamers are known to be on. So he's meeting them where they are. So some of those platforms that they discussed were Twitch and Discord. And of course, I also referenced his YouTube channel. So Twitch is a platform that is a streaming platform where gamers can show themselves playing games and interact with other people that may come into their streaming room and watch them game. And there's people making a living off of Twitch because there's people who will subscribe to specific channels of these streamers and pay a fee, like a monthly fee, to subscribe to these channels. And then there's also an option to tip. So you see some gamers on Twitch are actually just making a living off of this. And there is that social communication aspect of it as well.
The next one is Discord. Now, we do have a video, and this is more about just the knowledge of like what these things are, like Twitch, Discord, YouTube. We pretty much know what YouTube is, but like a lot of times YouTube is used, like people post videos, even of them gaming, and people watch, and they have followers. Discord, though, is one that's quite popular, so it's easier for us to show this video. So it's about a little over 3 minutes, but it's just to kind of look at what Discord is and how it became into existence. And it's just good to know, particularly if you're working with youth that do use Discord. So we'll start that video now, and we'll be back in about a little over 3 minutes.
How do you go from building a chat app for games to revolutionizing the future of internet communities? Discord co-founders Jason Citron and Stan Wisniewski know the answer. Over the span of the last few years, they saw Discord grow from 0 to 140 million active users per month, while people use their platform to build communities around their interests, ranging from street fashion to cryptocurrency. But how did this app become the next big thing in communication? Join us as we break down Discord's early growth, their pivot beyond gaming, and how they are planning to become the go-to place for online communities. For more business breakdowns, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. For those of you who don't know, Discord is pretty easy to understand. Founded by Jason Citron and Stan Wisniewski, both lifelong gaming enthusiasts, Discord was originally an app for gamers. Allowing free voice, video and text chat options, the original idea behind Discord was to help gamers connect with their friends within communities called servers on the platform. Think of apps like Slack and WhatsApp. Discord falls into the same category of communication, allowing users to start their own online communities where they could invite their friends to join. Inside these servers, users can set up dedicated channels based on different topics, allowing people to find friends based on their interests. With features like these, it's pretty easy to understand why the app blew up within the gaming community. But how did it all start? Back then, people used a variety of apps to talk to their friends during gaming sessions, such as Skype or TeamSpeak. However, Citron and Wisniewski realized that these apps were outdated, leading to a less than ideal gaming experience. So, they decided to fix the problem and develop a platform that would allow gamers to move past all of these disruptions.
The idea for Discord came from looking at our own experiences playing lots of online games back around 2014 and sort of noticing that the tools that we were using to play these games were pretty outdated. The tools that we were using didn't have good mobile apps, you couldn't send pictures to your friends in them, and the voice quality we knew could be better. And so what we really did was create an all-in-one voice, video, and text chat app that replaced this constellation of tools that people would use.
Now, what most people don't know is that Discord emerged from a gaming studio run by Citron and Wisniewski that developed a tablet-based multiplayer game with an inbuilt voice function to help people communicate. But after realizing that the best part of their game was the inbuilt chat, Wisniewski suggested that they focus on building the feature into a product. Now, while this was an ambitious idea at the time, Citron and Wisniewski didn't have a lot of competitors, because even the most popular gaming servers, such as TeamSpeak and Ventrilo, had their fair share of issues. These apps would ask gamers to rent servers and pay monthly fees. They would also have to share their server's IP address, and their friends would then have to download the application. So let's just say that using these apps wasn't very easy. So with Discord, Citron gave gamers a way to solve all their problems. The platform featured a clean, easy to navigate design. Along with that, it was completely free to use. With a desktop client and a web app, Users could invite their friends with a simple link that could be opened up on any browser, making things 10 times easier than they were before. Want to improve the way you manage your
Okay, so yeah, we thought it was important to include just a description of Discord, because I know for myself in my own clinical practice, it's not uncommon for a youth to tell me when they're speaking about their friends to reference their friends on Discord. So we figured that it would be important to reference that, just so we can understand, the platforms that our youth are using to engage socially. And again, like as the video explains, it is a gaming platform, and it's also used for other interests and ways for people to connect over shared interests. So, I mean, it's of more than once I've had a youth come to me and say, my friends on Discord told me I should talk to you about this. So it really is a way of social connection for young people who are gamers. And we discussed YouTube briefly. Similarly to streaming, YouTube is something that is another platform that gamers watch other gamers and communicate with other gamers. And some of these gamers on YouTube have like 4 to 5 million followers, and they sell merchandise and they have fans. So it's really interesting to see that sort of social phenomenon too. PlayStation Network and Xbox Live and virtual reality. I think that those are things that we're probably a little bit more familiar with, like such as in the photo here, people playing games with each other and being able to, use the voice chat over the games and, talk about what they're doing while they're gaming together. And virtual reality, I think that that's being taken in a direction, where there is more social connection with it. And now we're going to get into gaming during the pandemic, so I'm going to hand it over to you, Heather.
Thank you. So, I hope you guys are enjoying this so far. We wanted to just pay a little bit of attention to what the pandemic has done in terms of gaming. So, basically, what we wanted to look at are some of the trends. So, obviously, with the onset of the pandemic, people, certainly found themselves abruptly, seeking new avenues for kind of entertaining themselves, given the fact that most people became stuck in their homes. So they're still trying to, seek a means of healthy sense of community and connecting with people. So how are they going to do that? Because one of the other things that we saw with the onset of the pandemic is an overall decline in psychological health. So how do we address this health during times of lockdowns? So one of the, results is that there's been an increase in gaming, which I'm sure that nobody here is surprised to find, given that there's been an overall increase in screen time in general. So then we have to kind of decide, okay, well, is it a friend or a foe? There's pros and cons to this aspect, especially during a time of a pandemic. So I wanted to kind of just pull some of the numbers to see, what some of the trends, how it was impacted when the COVID-19 pandemic started. So the pandemic, which was declared in March of 2020, by June, we noticed overall there was a 39% increase globally in gaming. And then they have it broken down by region, with 52% in Latin America, 42% in the Asia Pacific area, 34% in Europe and the Middle East, and 15% in North America. I was looking for specific Canadian content, but I found it actually difficult to really nail it down. I did manage to pull a few, little tidbits of information. But obviously, I'm sure it would be no surprise to anyone that the COVID-19 pandemic has seen a surge in sales in the gaming industry. And I just thought that this was interesting that just 1 month after the declaration of the pandemic on March the 12th in 2020, Nintendo Switches sold out worldwide. So you could not buy a Nintendo Switch on the planet less than a month after the COVID-19 pandemic was declared. Some other things in terms of a Canadian context, screen time in general for elementary schools more than doubled from an average of 2.6 hours per day to 5.8 hours per day. And that is in addition to the time they spent homeschooling. So that does not include the amount of time they spent online for virtual learning. And this information was drawn from a study that was completed in Ontario. So yes, as of June 2020, the time spent video gaming increased by double digits, and a noticeable increase in multiplayer games that seemed to prove exceptionally popular. So we'll get into that, the reasons for that. Overall, though, basically there was, playing video games with the onset of the pandemic was encouraged by several organizations, including the World Health Organization. So the United Nations kind of said they put its support behind a gaming industry initiative called #PlayApartTogether, aimed at keeping people socially active while remaining isolated. So this actually is in direct contradiction to past statements from the World Health Organization prior to the pandemic, who were kind of putting out the warning signs of, in relation to too much screen time and video games. So even in the research I did, there was a lot of gamers who actually expressed surprise that this actually was supported by the WHO. I guess a caveat to this, though, is that the recommendation has its limitations because they don't really have a lot of data to address the long-term impact of making this recommendation. So if they're telling us, okay, hey, you're stuck home, play games, well, we don't really know long-term what that's going to look like or what the ramifications are going to be for that. But in any event, that was kind of the initiative at that time. So when we talk about, some of the pros to gaming, and these, are closely related, but, the overall message that basically, while it might appear that kids and adolescents are spending more time in their rooms, they're doing this, they're meeting online, and instead of going to the mall or the park, they're meeting online to basically hang out. So socialization is certainly, an important factor that would, is really a positive thing for kids to do, to be able to remain connected, not just kids, youth, and adults. But the increased numbers playing in multiplayer mode, that skyrocketed. So, gamers were no longer really playing these single player mode, but, to make up for the lack of in-person communication, they moved to multiplayer modes or playing more online and playing in these battle arenas that Derek talked to a little bit about earlier. So when we talk about maintaining our mental health, and anxiety and coping, I noticed in the research that there was a link between playing video games and a reduction in anxiety. So as people, were playing video games, they were kind of watching the news and the fears and the devastation associated with COVID-19. They were watching that a lot less. So it was kind of, gaming was a means for them to counter this onslaught of bad news. And it gave them something else to focus on, thus kind of helping them, cope and manage their anxiety a little bit better. And there was also reported increases of mood improvement. So even without pandemic, there was some research in the beginning that indicated challenges and tasks associated with gaming allow people at their skill level to be successful. So if they start a task and they're able to complete the task successfully, this would, contribute to a, improved mood. And generally speaking, I know for myself, if I'm engaging in an activity I enjoy, then I'm more likely to experience an improved mood. When we talk about the stress relief, so this obviously relates to the decrease in anxiety and allows people to calm themselves, and they're kind of sinking into something which is not stressful for them. So they're not worrying about the pandemic when they're engaged with the games. Again, this is, relates to escape. So it relates to the stress relief, and that they find the games an effective way to escape from life stressors. So it provides a nice distraction. Other methods that they would use as escape during their leisure time have kind of been effectively shut down because, of all the restrictions and public health. So, it allows them to escape from reality, even if it's for a limited time. And it's a way to kind of go out and explore things while still being stuck inside. Finally, we can talk about some cognitive stimulation. So it's this ability to kind of keep attention without it being overwhelming. So you're still exercising the brain, like certain games, especially ones that deal with rhythmic games and puzzle games that kind of can keep you engaged. So it's important to note that, these factors have positive results and, they are all connected and intertwined. But other positives that have been noted in literature that I saw were a sense of normalization. So, a lot of people gamed before the pandemic, so it's normal for them to kind of continue with this activity. So it doesn't really disrupt their lives quite as much. But of course, with every pro, there has to be a con. So, negatives also come with this. One of the negatives, obviously, spending more money on video games is, we threw out some numbers earlier about the increase in sales and all that good stuff, buying consoles, buying your avatars, buying your characters. I mean, it's a big business. So it's great for families that can afford it. However, there's also a lot of people that can't really afford it, but might choose to spend their money on it anyway. The duration of play, so wasting time. So it ties into unhealthy coping and some avoidance as we prevent ourselves from doing the things that, we need to do. And it's sometimes like just really easy to jump into the game as it is to complete our schoolwork, especially if we're not really being policed all that much online. So, if we're expected to be doing schoolwork, hey, I could just kind of play my video game maybe a little bit too. And I think that, that kind of ties to the unhealthy coping. So, we might avoid dealing with things and coping in this way. We effectively have other ways of coping is kind of been cut off to us, whether it's being outside, being in the community, or doing other activities. So we kind of become fixated on this one way of coping and avoiding, obviously, activities. The babysitter is an interesting one because I think it really does impact our family connections. As the pandemic started, we also had a lot of parents who were forced to work from home, didn't have access to childcare. So now all of a sudden the computer and the video game becomes the babysitter. So we're really not, spending the same amount of time with our children or with our families than we would be prior to the pandemic. So while the COVID-19, pandemic can exacerbate symptoms related to anxiety and depression, and playing video games can be helpful with it, but it can also lead to an increase in those individuals experiencing internet gaming disorder and problematic gaming behaviors because, it's an increased response or a response to increased stress. COVID-19 is a prominent life stressor, and children and adolescents may choose this as a coping strategy. So if we have more people choosing it, then we're going to have more people who are likely to develop, problematic gaming behaviors. So the research did note that there was seemed to be the increase in IGD or the gaming disorder was more significant with adolescents and emerging adults than it was with younger children. So one of the reasons for this relates to the fact that younger children, they might be supervised more closely than adolescents are. And also they are more likely to obey their parents. Further, with adolescents, they're kind of at an age where they tend to be more vulnerable to the onset of various emotional and behavioral problems, as well as addictive disorders. So they're kind of at this critical period where they're more likely to develop a problematic behavior. And it's just one other thing, I guess, to note is that children who already had existing diagnosis or issues related to anxiety and or depression were more likely to develop internet gaming disorder since the onset of the pandemic than children and adolescents who didn't have these pre-existing conditions. So I guess the bottom line is that when it comes to the rights or the wrongs of it is, balance is the key. Every individual is different. We need to recognize that the more vulnerable the population is, then the more preventative measures that and intervention that we might have to implement and might be required. So I don't think there's a real cut and dry answer as to whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. And I think that it's just, like I said, with everything else, balance is the key. So that is my piece, and I will just flip this over. And just, I guess, I'll hand it over to Kim and Derek.
So anyway, sorry for going over. I guess as social workers, our judgment of time isn't always the best, but apologize for that. But anyway, yeah, that's our presentation. I don't know if there's any questions or comments regarding what we, kind of the information we shared with you there today.
No, that was wonderful. Thank you so much, Kimberly and Heather. Just a couple questions. We do have time for a couple. So if you do have any questions, feel free to send them in as well. But in terms of, I know you mentioned, the question is around, you mentioned about young people, more the problematic behaviors happening more in adolescents. But how young have you seen problematic gaming in youth?
In terms of my own clinical experience, the youngest I've seen is probably around 6, 7 years old. And I remember a couple of years ago, I saw a young person, and their honestly, their behaviors were like some of the things they were doing were so reminiscent that it was like I knew I could pick out the game that they were playing. And when I spoke to the parents, they acknowledged that he was playing Grand Theft Auto and didn't really see a problem with it. And so they were bringing him to counseling for, really, it was behavioral stuff. But the behaviors you could see were being, not saying they weren't there before, but they were being influenced by the very inappropriate game to be playing at that age. And I even said to them, I can't compete with Grand Theft Auto. A 1 hour counseling session cannot compete with hours and hours every day playing Grand Theft Auto at the age of 7.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think recently I had an experience with whereby one of my clients, I believe, a 10-year-old, acknowledged that she was having difficulty sleeping because she was thinking about a video game that she was playing. And it was, when you think about some of the tactics that are built into these video games to make them have that addictive quality, it was pretty interesting that it was some sort of a time-sensitive thing. There was only so much time that this game provided to get this specific reward. So this child was thinking about this so much, and it was impacting the child's sleep at 10 years old.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you both for that. We have another really good question in terms of the distinction. Is there a distinction made between playing video games and watching others play, i.e. YouTube, in terms of negative impacts? And the example given, if a parent limits game time to 2 hours per day, but then the youth spends 2 hours watching others play on YouTube, does this equate to 4 hours total game time?
I think maybe from a parenting perspective, maybe looking at it in the context of screen time as opposed to just specific game time.
But yeah, the watching, and I'll be honest with you, it wasn't until the other day, and I was watching one of these videos on Discord or Twitch, the whole watching people play video games, has always baffled me. And then myself and Kim were talking the other day, and then I recall, when I was, a teenager back in the 80s and going to the Avalon Mall on a Saturday, and if somebody was playing a video game and was doing exceptionally well, next thing you know, a crowd would gather around the game. And you could easily sometimes have 15, 16 people watching somebody play a video game. And I remember doing that at 14, 15. And then I was like, really, that's no different than what our youth are doing today. Because I've often racked my brain, that is the most boring thing to watch. And I think back, yeah, I used to do it. I did it live at the games arcade. So I would agree with Kim, though, with regards to looking at it as screen time, because sometimes they can, even the watching, whether it's on YouTube, Discord, Twitch, whatever the platform, they can spend a lot of time like still exposed to the games and then watching. So yeah, it's one of those ones where I think from a parenting perspective, some people may take it differently, but I would go with the screen time.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, thank you.
In regards to watching,
what's that?
Oh no, I was just going to make a comment that, you know, for some of us, it's really hard to understand how gamers would find it interesting to watch other gamers, you know, but I mean, I find it really boring to watch golf on TV. I don't understand why people would watch golf. So I can see, you know, the gaming as that, having that allure of the, you know, spectator sport for those who have interest.
Yeah, the person who had asked the question said agreed, and thanks for your answer around that question. I guess we have time for one more question. In terms of, have you seen a link between problematic gaming and other risk factors or underlying issues amongst youth? So the gaming kind of came after another underlying issue that may have been present.
Can you just repeat that one, Annette?
Yeah, have you seen a link between problematic gaming and other underlying issues that a youth may be facing?
I was trying to think. Yeah, I think sometimes, if there's an underlying issue, whether it's been identified or not, I do think sometimes the gaming will bring it out. That sometimes that there's something that hasn't been identified, but then with the gaming, then other behaviors do tend to come out. And it might be around, like, you know, a lot of times it's coping with anxiety. And next thing you know, the gaming gets tied into, really becomes almost like a avoidant behavior. So the gaming is a substitute for engaging in other things, so they avoid other tasks, other responsibilities through the gaming. But sometimes, like I said, and a lot of times it may have already been there, but was just kind of subtle and easier to hide, and then it may, you know, come out after the fact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's
and I agree. You know, oh, I think we have a little bit of a lag there. Sorry.
Sorry, go ahead, Annette.
Oh no, Kimberly, you can go ahead there.
Oh, I was just going to mention, you know, that I was just saying that I do agree with Derek, you know, in his reference to anxiety, and I think we can use it in reference to other emotional dysregulation, in that, you know, as we mentioned throughout the presentation, this gaming can be used as an escape mechanism from those, you know, from those emotions that don't feel so good. So it's being seen as used as a distraction technique, and distraction can be very helpful, as we all know, you know, that we can use distraction as a helpful coping mechanism. However, when distraction, you know, becomes elongated, like when it's for long periods of time, you know, these youth are not experiencing the emotions that they need to experience. So I would tie it back to some issues with emotional dysregulation as well. And, you know, just recognizing and perhaps like helping the youth understand that emotions provide messages to us, and, you know, and signals as to some things that we may need to change, and kind of relate it back to that. But you know, in my practice, I've definitely seen a correlation with some emotional dysregulation there as well.
And ultimately, I think, and the word has come up a few times here today, I think it just comes back to balance. That, like, if I'm seeing a youth, sometimes parents might be concerned about gaming behavior, but if I do an assessment and see them, and if you got a youth that's like, attendance at school is good, they're doing satisfactory in school, they're involved in extracurricular activities, whether it be through sports, music, or whatever. And so there's balance in their life. So yes, they do play video games, but video games is not the be-all, end-all. They do have other things in their life. So sometimes, so that's what I was looking at. And I would say any behavior, if you become overly obsessed with any behavior, it's not healthy, even if it's something good. So really, it just, I think, comes back to balance and encouraging balance and facilitating that with youth or even young adults, because I see a lot of young adults in my private practice, and the gaming is a huge issue for that population as well.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. Thank you. And I did say that was the last question, but we just had another question come in, and so this will be our last question. But in terms of the school, has there been an increase regarding school refusal due to gaming? Are you seeing that in your practice?
I wouldn't say directly, but I will say that kids or teens who are not in school are in my experience. I got to be honest, I haven't read any evidence or looked at any research on it, but my experience is that they do game more. They may not game during the daytime. Sometimes they may be asleep all day, but they'll game excessively at night. And I will say this, and this goes to another thing, and I know the Child and Youth Advocate had a report on it out within I think it was in the last year. The amount of youth that are not in school, that are absent from school for a variety of reasons, is astronomical. Like, it's so high, and I do see a lot of youth that are not in school, and but I would say, yeah, their gaming behavior, the amount of time they spend gaming, I would say is above average for the vast majority.
Mm-hmm. Okay, no, thank you. And that brings us to the end of our questions. So thanks everyone for sending in your questions. And certainly just to wrap up the session for this afternoon, want to take an opportunity to sincerely thank Derek and Kimberly and Heather for this informative and stellar presentation, and for sharing their knowledge, experience, and expertise with us today as they explored gaming behavior in youth. And I think regardless of your area of practice, if you work with youth or young adults, I'm sure that this session has provided you with information that you can reflect on, integrate into your own work, or maybe sparked your interest in doing some more research in the area as well. And Derek and Kimberly, your passion for this work shines through, and the services you provide are certainly critical and essential to the mental health and well-being of children and youth, and certainly fits with the theme for this year's Social Work Month. Just want to note that the PDF of the PowerPoint presentation is available in the handout section of the webinar platform, as are some of the links to the videos that was shown today. And RSWs may claim 1.5 required CPE credits for attending this webinar as per the NLCSW CP policy. And as you begin to sign off, we do ask that you complete the evaluation form that will appear on your screen. Your feedback is always so greatly appreciated. And to our presenters, I don't know if you had any final words that you wanted to say before we sign off.
No, we're good. Thanks for having us do this. I know, Annette, we've talked about it for a while, and so I'm just glad we were able to do something and share this information.
Thanks for having me too. It was a great opportunity.
Okay, so thank you. On that note, I'll say thanks again, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day, and stay safe, everyone. Take care.